This is Brandon Helwig of UCFsports.com, and I'm honored today to be joined by Mark Narducci, a longtime Philadelphia-based reporter who's pretty much covered it all in the city of brotherly love. I know, Mark, you got kind of your start covering, was it South New Jersey high school sports?
I
Is that
did,
right?
Brandon. Yep.
Oh,
So,
oh, you're in the
yep.
Hall of Fame. Now, you're a Hall of Famer covering South Jersey, right?
Well, yeah, and there were a lot of great players through the years in South Jersey. Glenn Foley, who went on to be a quarterback at Boston College, he beat Notre Dame and had,
Okay.
had a pro career. And there are a lot of good athletes from the Southern New Jersey area, and I did that for a long time. In fact, I'm still doing it now. But
Okay.
yeah, there have been a lot of really good athletes from it's a 7 county area. It's fairly big, so there are about 80 plus high schools.
Okay. So obviously, to continue, I'm talking to Mark because UCF is hosting Villanova in football this Saturday at 6:30 p.m. from the Bounce House. Mark has a show this week in Villanova football that he co-hosts. Started this year. I know you've been covering Villanova for the last few years, kind of off and on through your Philadelphia career, and I know you do a lot for Hero Sports, which covers FCS athletics, and you're involved in broadcasting now too. You do some broadcasting for ESPN Plus. Is that right?
I do. I do Temple soccer games for ESPN Plus. I'm an analyst for that. So, I do
Okay.
some live broadcasting for some other colleges. I'll
Okay.
tell
Okay.
you
Well,
what, Brandon. I'm retired, but it beats having a real job. It's
that definitely sounds like a lot of fun still. So, I mean, before we kind of get talking about, Villanova football this year, you've been covering it all, like we just said, in Philadelphia for a long time. How did you get your start? Being in sports media, was it something that you grew up a sports fan and went to college, or maybe wrote for your high school paper? How did you get your start? In sports media.
and I started actually in cable TV. Cable TV with local origination back then. I used to do a ton of high school stuff, and
Okay.
we did a newscast. And then I realized, I better. I had done some freelance writing, so I just got more into it. And then the Philadelphia Inquirer in 1984 started doing a South Jersey section of high school sports, and I started doing that. And I was with them for 37 years. Uh, we covered a lot. Those were the days in print where you could work all you wanted to. There were plenty of freelance budgets, and it was a lot of fun. And we covered it, and they did a ton of print stuff. And then I didn't really start getting into the pros and the colleges more till like early 2000s, and then
Okay.
I started doing them much more than I did the high school. So it's all been great. It's all been great to
Yeah,
do it.
I mean, what are some of your favorite memories? Because you've covered a lot of the best moments, I guess, in Philadelphia history. I know you. We were just talking that obviously the Eagles won their first Super Bowl a few years ago after the 2017 season, and you were there, right? You were there in Minneapolis, right?
We were in Mini. I was one of the 24 people our paper sent to Minneapolis, and yeah, it was great. The only thing is, my job was to cover the Patriots. So when everybody was celebrating with the Eagles, I'm hearing Bill Belichick all getting dejected and not very happy, having to talk to the media there. But it was great. We worked out of the Mall of America. That was
Really?
our media center there,
Okay.
and people think it's glamorous, and it is great. Don't get me wrong, but we were working 12, 14-hour days every day there. And it was the coldest I've ever been in my life. I get in my car and there was frost inside it. I've never had
I don't
that
know
before.
anything. I'm from Florida. I don't know anything. That doesn't sound good at all.
No, no, but it was fun. And I'll give one more quick story. I've got this nutty fetish to try to get to all 50 states. So when I knew I was doing the Super Bowl, I said, this is my only chance to get to North Dakota. So one day we got done our work the Friday before the Super Bowl. There was not, media availability. I drove 4 hours to Fargo, went to the Roger Maris Museum in Fargo because you had to do something. You can't just
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
and drove 4 hours back, and it was nothing but like tumbleweeds all along the way, all but I got my 49th state. I still have to get the one more state though. I haven't done West Virginia is the only one. It's not that far from
Hey, I know. That's kind of hard to believe because that's not that far away from Pennsylvania. Yeah. You got to figure that out. What's the Roger Maris Museum like? I didn't even realize they had something like that.
Oh, well, he's a hero in Fargo. That's where he's from. And it's in this little mall, and it's just all this like shrine of Roger Maris and all these like his MVP trophies. In fact, one of his MVP trophies, it said, "We're sorry we can't present it. It got stolen." But they had one of his MVP trophies, all stuff from the Yankees and the Cardinals and stuff like that. So I said if I had to go to Fargo, I have to do that.
That's interesting. If I'm in that way, I'm definitely going to stop it there. I went to the Ty Cobb Museum a few years ago when UCF was playing in the Peach Bowl. The 2017 season. Ty Cobb, he's like a distant relative of mine. I don't know how we're related, but we are somehow. But it's in Royston, Georgia, which is somewhere in the middle of nowhere in northern Georgia. And they have the only thing the town is known for is Ty Cobb, and they got this museum that I don't know. I went to that. That was kind of neat going to that a few years ago.
Yeah, those museums are great, and also I went to where they their Chamber of Commerce where they have like the wood chipper from the Fargo movie, and I just. And went to North Dakota State, and back then it was all Carson Wentz stuff that they had there.
Yeah.
Because my rule is you have to do something in the state. You can't just like drive.
Right. You can't just drive for 2 minutes and turn around. Right.
Well, that was 49. So when my bosses, when my bosses told me you're going to the Super Bowl, the first thing I said to my wife was North Dakota, and of course she thought I was nuts. And I had to call her when I got there, and she thought I was doubly nuts. So
yeah. Before we talk about Villanova, is there any other memory, or was there a favorite coach you've covered or favorite player through the years in the Philadelphia area? Is there any other besides that Super Bowl with the Eagles? What kind of stands out about your time covering sports in Philly?
A guy from Philly, but he didn't play in Philly, was the late Kobe Bryant. He was the best. I covered a few NBA All-Star games, and Bryant would be there. And, he spoke fluent Italian, so they have these foreign reporters. He'd be speaking in Italian to them. Then he'd be speaking in these different languages. And he was always a great, insightful interview. I'm so sad at what happened with him and the tragic passing, but he was one of the best to interview.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll talk a little bit about this weekend. For UCF and Villanova, this is actually, I think, the second time the two teams will play. Back in 2006, and I know you were kind of off and on covering Villanova through the years, but the last year that UCF was playing in the Citrus Bowl, which is near downtown Orlando, they hosted Villanova, and I think UCF won. Was the score like 35-16? But the game, I was there, the game was a lot closer than maybe the score indicated. I think Villanova actually outgained UCF in yards, and the next season UCF moved on campus to the Bounce House, which I know you said you've been to once before, right? You were covering Temple, right, in 2016 when Matt Rule was still there, and you came to Orlando.
That was a wild game, right? They scored right at the end, and I think it was 20. You would know better. I think it was 26-25 there.
It was something like that. It was a last second or last minute win. And I remember for UCF fans, I think I told you this on the phone earlier. I mean, no one ever is excited or happy about a loss, but for UCF fans, Temple winning that game is the reason they won the American, or won the division that enabled them to win the American, and not South Florida. I think if UCF would have beaten Temple, South Florida would have won the division. And there's been a rivalry war on I-4 with UCF and South Florida. So I know a lot of UCF fans always kind of mention that game and are actually maybe happy that UCF lost to deny their rival South Florida championship.
Brandon, when people talk about Temple and they've struggled recently, they forget how great those teams were in 15 and 16. They had a ton of pros, PJ Walker, the quarterback, and just a lot of them. And Matt Rule did a great job. They lost in the AAC title game in 15, and then they won it in 16. Yeah. And then your guys started again.
Yeah, Temple was the team of the AAC kind of those years, and then UCF kind of carried the torch, and then it was Cincinnati.
Yeah.
But so I guess kind of tell me a little bit more about Villanova. I know you've been covering them for a few years, and definitely have your show this year, this week in Villanova football. I know they were 5-6 a season ago. I think predicted 7th in the CAA. 2-0 though to start off this year against Lehigh and Colgate. What's you just going into this season? I know it's still early. What was kind of the outlook for Villanova? I know they got some experience returning. Is that a team that they feel like they should, finish higher than that preseason predicted number 7, or what's kind of the outlook you think this year?
Let's take it back a year, Brandon. They were picked to win the CAA last year.
Okay.
And they actually finished 6-5, not 5-6, but they were 6-5. They beat their rival Delaware at the end. So this year they come in, right? And they're picked 7th. And you talk about the old chip on the shoulder. You go from being picked first to being picked 7th. And now they're in some national rankings, which means very little after 2 weeks.
Right.
But they think they were surprised that they were picked first last year because they lost a lot to graduation.
Okay.
And they were surprised they were picked 7th this year because this is an experienced team. Now, you could probably say this, and I'm sure for UCF or anybody else, with the COVID and the extra year, but they have 19 graduates on their team. Guys that have, gotten their degrees.
Right.
They have several 6-year players that are playing. So this is an experienced team. And I know this is not unique to college football. It happens all the time. But this is a real veteran group.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it as you're talking. Look at the quarterback, Connor Watkins. He's a graduate student. The starting running back, Jalen Jackson. He's a graduate student. There's guys who've been on the team since 2018. They've been on the team a while. So winning the first 2 games, I know those are games that you expected to win. But did the games kind of go per the expectations? What kind of stood out to you in those first 2 wins for Villanova?
Yeah, they really. It's weird. The second game. Well, first of all, they beat Lehigh.
Right.
They had no problems with that, and
it was like 38-10. I know Villanova rushed for a ton of yards in that game.
Yeah, and they didn't play their starters a long time. They didn't really try to roll it up. And then they hosted Colgate last week, and we've had terrible weather here in the East. It's been muggy and humid, and Saturday there were thunderstorms. So the game was delayed 40 minutes, and then they had a stoppage during the game. So it's really they couldn't really get a lot of rhythm in it, but they did what they had to do. They beat 2 less than high-level Patriot League teams, and they were supposed to do that. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah, I was looking at the box score, and the quarterback Connor Watkins against Colgate, he had 8 completions, 8 of 11. Not bad, but it was over 300 yards. 8 of 11 for 310 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, you can look at the box score and see how that happens. Were there several deep throws, or how does one do that? How does one only throw the ball 8 times yet over 300 yards?
Yeah, he had a couple of 60+ yard completions and all that. So it was good. The thing about Watkins is you'll look at his numbers, Brandon, and he hasn't rushed very well this year. I mean, he had 2 rushing touchdowns for a yard the other day, a yard each. But he can run. I mean,
so he's known as a dual threat guy, not just the passing quarterback.
Yeah, he could do it. And by the way, this is his 5th year, and I'm almost positive he has another year of eligibility.
That's how it goes these days. That's how it goes. Exactly.
Yeah. Last year was his first year.
So tell us a little. Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit more about Connor Watkins. Said I know he's been with the program. I think since 2019, I believe was his first year. I was looking at a lot of guys have been there since 2018. So I know he kind of was a backup or reserve the last few years. He said last year was his first year as a starter.
Right.
Tell me a little bit more about Connor. What kind of stands out? Were there any particular moments that he had last year? What kind of kid is he? What kind of stands out about Connor as a quarterback?
Well, here's the thing. Last year he threw 11 interceptions. 8 of them came in the first 4 games. After that, he was a much more consistent. And by the way, 4 of those interceptions came in a win against Long Island. So he was a much more consistent player there. Right now, they've been without their top receiver, Darren Hayek, who's a potential FCS All-American, a very good player. He's been out. Now, Mark Ferrani, the head coach, we asked him about is he going to be ready for UCF? And this is no inside information. He
Right.
said he dressed the other night, but then the delays happened and all that. I don't know if he was going to play, but I just feel he wants them ready. He wants them ready for the conference when they play Rhode Island, which is a really good team next week. I think he's going to play against UCF. Again, I have no inside information on that.
Okay.
But I think he is, and they have another receiver named Pringle who would be a number one on a lot of teams, and maybe on this team too. But with Pringle and Hayek, that's a very, very good combination. And if they're both on the field, I mean, I know UCF faces great receivers all the time,
Right.
but you got to cover these guys.
Those are guys to watch. You mentioned Hayek, and I'm looking up his bio right now. He was first team all conference last year. He only played in 8 games, started all 8. He had 810 yards for 8 touchdowns. And you mentioned Rajon Pringle. I know last week he had 168 yards receiving. So these guys are putting up some fantastic numbers. Tell me a little bit about the running back, Jalen Jackson. I know he's an experienced guy. He's been with Villanova a few years. I believe he's the leading rusher this year. I know in that first game against Lehigh, he had, I don't know the box score in front of me, I think he had 160 or something. I know he had
140 yards on
140. Okay, I know he had well over 100 yards in that first game against Lehigh. He's a pretty experienced guy, right?
Yeah, their whole running backs are graduate students. So they're 3. They have 3 really good running backs. And Jackson, he's not real big. I think he's about 5'8", about 205. But he can take it to the house. He's got good speed. Right now in 2 games, and you can't go by these stats, but he's averaging 10 yards a carry so far. So he's kind of their home run threat. What is good about this team is these running backs, at least so far, they've all bought into their roles because they could all be number 1 backs on other teams. Like they have a guy, D. Will Barley, again, 5th year, already graduated, graduate student. He's about 5'8", also about 205. He's the better receiver though. He can, but again, he's averaging like 9 yards a carry. And then they have a guy, Tidi Io Durojai, and I think I said that right, but if I didn't, it wouldn't be the first time I butchered it. And he's number 1, and he hasn't carried the ball that much, but he's a good player. But what he does, and you don't see this very often, he's a good special teams player. He'll go down and make tackles and things like that. So they use him on special teams. But again, he's got kind of game-breaking ability too. It's a very, very strong backfield. And then they got a young guy named Isaiah Wright, who's a redshirt freshman, who saw some time in, I don't want to say garbage time, but he saw some late game time. And he might be one of the running backs of the future. Don't know if UCF will see him, but he's a good player. He played in the Philadelphia area high school wise. So, I think that's their strongest position at running back.
Yeah, I was just looking. He's from Malvern Prep, which I know is right down the road from Villanova. It doesn't look like that Villanova really leans heavily on the transfer portal. It looks like most. Am I right or wrong on this? It seems like majority of the roster. I know they have some out of state guys, but they do get a lot of guys from Jersey and the Philly area. What have you kind of noticed with the roster makeup? Do they mostly recruit from the high school ranks and not so much the transfer portal?
Well, you know what they do? They'll get about six or 7 guys, Brandon, maybe a year from the transfer portal. This year they have a defensive lineman named Jake Reichwein. And what's interesting is he transferred from another FCS school. He transferred from Holy Cross, which is a really good school. And he's already had 3 tackles for loss. And he was a good player for Holy Cross.
Okay.
And they were a playoff team, and they did really well last year. I think they went 12-1. So he was a big deal for them. But he is from the area. He's from like the Doylestown area, which is a suburb of Philly, and he's really helped fortify their defensive line. So he is one of the transfer portal guys. But you're right; they basically have guys that they recruited, and it's been a good formula for them.
Yeah, how are those lines? I mean, it's going to be hard to forecast how they'll fare against an FBS team, but offensive line, defensive line. I know you just mentioned the Holy Cross transfer on the defensive line. Are they fairly experienced? Are there some younger players there? How would you evaluate the lines for Villanova?
Well, the defensive line is not as experienced, and that's why they did bring some transfers. But I'll tell you, Brandon, This offensive line, they don't have a player under 300 pounds. They have a 6-year guy named Michael Corby. I think he was second team all CAA last year. He's a guard. He's 6'3", 335. In fact, I wrote it down here. Their left tackle is Stefan Voltaire. He's 6'5", 315. Their center is Jake Picard. He's on the small side. He's 6'4",
Right.
305. Their
That's on that
right
small,
tackle
yeah.
is Temi Adjoro Tutu, and he might be. Yeah, I know. I was just kidding. He might be
Yeah.
a guy that has a little NFL. NFL people have asked Mark Ferrante about him. Put it that way. And
Yeah.
he's 6'5", 310. He's listed as a senior, but I think he has a couple of years of eligibility if he wants it. And the right guard is Nick Torres. He's another 6-year guy. He and Corby are 6-year guys, and he's 6'6", 320. So it's not like their defense of UCF is just going to be able to push these guys around. I'm not
Right.
saying they're going to dominate them, but
Right.
you know what I mean? They're going to have to show up and play against these guys.
Yeah, when you look at that defensive side of the ball, who are some of the stars on that side? Any D linemen, linebackers, secondary? Like, are there a couple names to watch? Like, who are some of the better players for Villanova on defense?
Yeah, well, Reichwein, 55, he'll play defensive end. Their leading guy is Shane Hartzell. He's a sophomore, about 6 foot, 225. He was their leading tackler last year.
Okay.
He's going to be a guy that's going to be he's going to make a lot of tackles. Brandon Bell's another linebacker. He'll make a ton of tackles in there. They have a safety named Elijah Glover. Again, he's a local guy from South Jersey that they got. And for people that don't know, Southern New Jersey's not that far from Villanova. Certain parts are,
right.
You know, they could be between 40 minutes and an hour and a half away from that. So, and then they have a corner named Isaac Wachter. He'll be wearing number 0. Again, you can't go by stats, but he already has an interception and three
Right.
pass breakups. So, you know, they're good players. Now, can they do it against UCF? I don't know. Remember last year they lost to Army. They got beaten pretty badly, 49-10. Yeah, they try to play. They don't do it every year, but they try to play, and that's the Army 49-10.
Yeah, I looked. I think they played Penn State in 2021. Obviously, the 2020 season was in the spring. I was going back and see. I believe Villanova, if I'm not mistaken, I think has won. Is it maybe 4 games? Is it three or 4 games against FBS opponents? And I think they all were either against Temple.
Well,
or
here's the thing: they lost to Penn State. They lost to Penn State 38-17 in 2021. That's a year they had a really good team.
Yeah.
19.
Yeah. I think I put up this.
2018 they beat Temple. It's the last time they played.
It looks like they beat Temple in 2003, 2009, and 2018. They beat Temple, and it looks like they beat Rutgers in 2002. So is that a game that would be a regular or a semi-regular matchup, Temple and Villanova in football? Is that so? After that loss, are you saying that Temple is declining future games with Villanova football, or is that kind of the current situation?
Yeah, after that, Temple wasn't too crazy about playing.
I can definitely understand that and everything. But tell me a little bit about Villanova's coach, Mark Ferrante.
I don't think they're going to play in the future. Villanova would like to do it. I don't think Temple's that interested, to be honest with you.
Gotcha. Well, tell me a little bit about Villanova's head coach, Mark Ferrante. I know he took over for the legendary longtime Villanova coach Andy Talley after the 2016 season, and I was looking. I'm not sure if there's any coach almost at any level who's been at his school longer than Mark Ferrante. It looks like he joined the Villanova coaching staff in 1987 and has never left. I know he was an offensive line coach, assistant head coach under Andy Talley, and finally took over as head coach in 2017. Can you tell us a little bit about him? Obviously, he's a Villanova lifer. What's Coach Mark Ferrante like?
You want to go one further than that? He played for Andy Talley. He was a quarterback at St. Lawrence University.
Okay,
So
I didn't go back that far. I was
long,
looking up the Wikipedia profile. I did not get that. So wow, that is
so
impressive.
they have a long, yeah, they have a long history together, as you mentioned, all those years. This is his 7th year. In the first 6, and one of them was that they were 2-2 during a COVID year. I don't know if you can count that, but they've been a competitive team all the time. He's done a great job running the program. He's not a guy that's going to panic. I don't think. Again, my dealings with him, he seems to be a level-headed, calm guy. He's not like one of these maniac college football coaches that is just yelling all the time.
Right.
And he puts this in perspective. Like, he thinks this is a great opportunity to face an FBS team. But what he hopes for, number one, and he wants to be competitive, but he wants to get out of there not banged up. Because, he's playing against a UCF team that probably has twice as many scholarships, more depth. And that's the trade-off when you're playing these teams. And I don't know, Brandon, if there's any payoff, if they're getting any payoff to come down there. I don't know.
Yeah, they're probably. I don't have the contract. They're probably getting
factor
close to $1 million. They're probably getting around $1 million, maybe a little less. So yeah, there is the payout
Well,
is the important part.
Yeah, that's worth it if you don't lose your quarterback, you don't lose. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, exactly. You need to be
stay
healthy for
healthy.
conference play. Exactly.
Yeah, they want to stay healthy. And by the way, he knows. He's the one that actually informed me that John Rice Plumlee would not be playing. He doesn't think this is going to be a cakewalk with the backup. So he knows that they have their work cut out for them. It's a big challenge, but they're really looking forward to it. The Villanova fans are coming down to Florida and coming to Orlando and having some fun, and so they're really pumped up about this.
Yeah, and I should mention, I don't know if I did at the beginning, but Villanova has a long and proud history, of playing FCS football. They won the national championship in 2009. I know Coach Ferrante. I think he's led the Wildcats to playoff appearances in 2019 and 2021. They were 10-3, in that 2021 season. And I guess that was a big reason why they were predicted highly in last year's preseason poll. I know that didn't pan out, but this is a team that, has won a lot of games. Now, I don't know if you were covering Villanova or remember, but do you remember maybe back in I think it was 2010, and, obviously they've always been a member of the Big East, but there was a feasibility study of whether Villanova would make the jump to FBS. And if they did, they would have a home in the Big East Football Conference. And I know that was something that UCF fans always followed because, South Florida was in the Big East in that time. And UCF was always rumored to kind of be, potentially invited to the Big East. But, South Florida's president always blocked it. So I know UCF fans were always kind of watching that Villanova football situation to see if that happened or not. And then, the Big East eventually kind of everything blew up with, the schools going to the ACC and everything else eventually became the American. But do you kind of remember that? Like, is Villanova, you kind of feel like this is where they should be. Like, that was the smart move in terms of just staying at that FCS level, you think?
Well, the problem is, first of all, they have a stadium. It's a nice stadium, but its seat like 12, 13,000. They would have had to spend so much money, Brandon, to upgrade on that. And I think they made the right decision. It's not like this the Philadelphia area, and Villanova, for people that don't know, is probably located about a half hour outside of Philly, depending on traffic. Philadelphia area is a pro sports town. I mean, even when Villanova won 2 national championships in basketball, the town was excited, but people were calling up the next day sports talk shows and wondering who the backup quarterback for the Eagles would be. That's just the way it is. They like their college sports here, but they're just rabid pro fans in Philly and Philadelphia area.
Yeah, well, I've had a fun time, a fun conversation. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, Mark. I'm very happy that you were able to join me tonight. I know everyone was going to be, excited to learn more about Villanova. So I appreciate you very much for joining us tonight, and thank you for your time. And best of luck in your future endeavors.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for asking me to be on tonight.